We started thinking the other day, there's going to be 7 teams with new driver pairings in 2021, which could end up creating some new chaotic inter-team rivalries. Whether that's between Sainz and Leclerc, Perez and Verstappen, Ocon and Alonso, the Haas drivers, or heck, even Lando and Daniel might end up feuding.
Today, we want to take a look back on 4 of F1's biggest inter-team rivalries and examine the toxic environments that came from battles both on and off the track. Although in recent years we've seen some fierce competition, overall the drivers have remained pretty respectable and we are not seeing the big dramatic personalities like we used to.
Now in most sports, when you're on the same team, you're going after the same goal. Whereas in Formula 1, there's the Constructors' Championship and the World's Drivers' Championship. So it's not just a battle between teams, it's also the drivers chasing after their own individual accomplishments. But before we get into the video, I'm going to ask you to comment right now below this video which rivalry you think is going to be the feistiest in 2021 and why. Tell us how it's going to happen, much like how we're about to tell you how these rivalries came about. If you are new to the channel, consider subscribing. If you are already subscribed, welcome back. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to leave it a like, and let's get into our first pairing.
Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, one of the first major rivalries that comes to mind is the fiery, multi-year battle between Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton. They grew up racing against each other throughout their childhood, and although it was very competitive from the get-go, they still considered each other to be very good friends. However, this completely changed when Lewis signed with Mercedes in 2013 alongside Nico after Schumacher's departure from F1. Tensions between the two already began to rise at the 2013 Malaysian Grand Prix when Rosberg was given team orders to hold position behind Hamilton, which obviously Rosberg was not happy about. Their on-track battles only got more intense throughout the years, with well-known highlights including the 2014 Bahrain Grand Prix when Rosberg defied team orders regarding his engine mode in order to stay ahead of Hamilton. Hamilton similarly defied team orders in Spain later that same year. One of the more confusing moments occurred during the Monaco Grand Prix, where Rosberg came to a halt on track during Hamilton's final qualifying run. It was clear that Hamilton believed Rosberg had done this on purpose, while Rosberg denied any truth to the accusation. And then there was the 2014 Belgian Grand Prix, with a collision between the two resulting in Hamilton's race being ruined with a puncture. Both Niki Lauda and Toto Wolff were quick to place blame on Rosberg for the incident, which only amplified the teammate rivalry throughout the media.
Their most famous collision happened in 2016 at the Spanish Grand Prix, with both Silver Arrows taking each other out on the opening lap. The incident continues to be mentioned in Spain every year, as it was a defining moment between the two, and because it was arguably one of the only exciting things we've seen at this track in recent years. The end of the 2016 season saw the championship come down to the final race, in which Hamilton purposely slowed down in order to build up traffic behind Rosberg, much to the team's disapproval. In a series of radio messages between Lewis, Bono, and Paddy Lowe, he demonstrated his anger towards Rosberg's looming championship title, where he went on to say, "Right now, I'm losing the world championship, so I'm not really bothered if I'm going to win or lose this race."
Their rivalry was exciting, dramatic, even a little bit petty at times, but I think we can all confidently say that F1 just has not been the same in terms of team rivalries ever since Rosberg's unexpected departure from the sport. Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber.
It seems like inter-team conflict in recent years was derived from having the best car on the grid. Because right before the Hamilton-Rosberg feud began, we had the previous Constructors' champion Red Bull have their own fair share of teammate rivalry. The rivalry between Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber had their first incident over a year before they became teammates at Red Bull Racing, when they collided behind the safety car at the wet 2007 Japanese Grand Prix. Vettel was promoted after the 2009 season to Red Bull to pair alongside Mark Webber. The teammate rivalry began back at the Turkish Grand Prix in 2010, when Vettel tried to make a pass on Webber for the lead. However, this move ended up causing a collision between the two drivers. Their relationship never seemed to be quite the same and slumped into another low in a qualifying session at Silverstone that same year, where the team removed an updated front wing from Webber's car and gave it to Vettel. And Vettel ended up using that front wing to get himself the pole position that race. Nonetheless, it was Webber that crossed the line in first place after Vettel got involved in an accident with Hamilton. The fight continued over at the Brazilian Grand Prix when Webber described his good form and performance were seen as an inconvenience to the Red Bull Racing team at this point in the year. Quoting, "I don't think I was meant to be in the hunt at all, so it has been maybe quite inconvenient."
Our next major conflict between the two occurred at the Malaysian Grand Prix in 2013. This started with the multi-21 situation, which was the team's orders that had been set up prior to the race that asked both drivers to hold position in order to score the maximum amount of points. Webber was leading the race, and with only 12 laps to go, both Vettel and Hamilton were closing in behind. The Red Bull team reminded both drivers of the multi-21 orders that were in effect. However, Vettel took things into his own hands. Instead of holding position and allowing Webber to cross the finish line in first, Vettel opted to not listen, instead overtaking to steal the win for himself and moving ahead in the championship. Webber obviously was not pleased with the outcome, and Vettel's lack of remorse did not help the situation, only leading to more internal conflict. Vettel and Webber were never able to put their issues aside, with their difficult relationship continuing to play out in the public eye. Overall, the conflict between the two came to a halt when Webber left at the end of the 2013 season.
In the end, the feud's main focal point came down to team orders and preferential treatment. The drivers were generally more respectful on track in comparison to other rivalries on our list. However, the tension between these two lasted long after Webber left the sport. Only in recent years has the dust begun to settle between the two.
Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. Here we see Lewis back on this list for a second time, with his rivalry against Fernando Alonso being one of the most talked about disputes in the sport, despite the fact that their time together only lasted for 1 year. This was another classic case of the number one driver taking issue with the newcomer, but in this instance, the impacts on the team were astronomical.
Following his 2 world titles with Renault, Alonso switched teams to McLaren in 2007, paired alongside rookie Lewis Hamilton, who was fresh out of GP2. Ron Dennis had led Alonso to believe that he would be the clear number one driver, but as the season got underway, it appeared as though McLaren had different plans, giving both drivers relatively equal treatment. Hamilton was quick to prove that he was a threat to Alonso, which only amplified the rivalry, and eventually turned into sabotage between the two.
Dangerous overtakes, collisions between the two, and aggressive tactics plagued the team, escalating to the point where Alonso purposely blocked Hamilton in the pit lane during qualifying at the Hungarian Grand Prix, therefore ruining his final run. Ultimately, this resulted in a penalty for Alonso, while Hamilton went on to win this race, but this defining moment in their teammate partnership took this on-track battle into the off-track realm. Further on-track shenanigans ended up impacting the drivers' results to the point where they ruined each other's chances at taking the World Championship, which gave the opportunity for Raikkonen to clinch the championship at the final race of the season, by 1 point. Arguably the most famous and intense aspect of their rivalry revolved around Spygate. Angered by the fact that he was not given preferential treatment, Alonso threatened to expose scandalous internal team information and emails regarding the illicit Ferrari designs that were obtained by a McLaren employee. As a result, Ron Dennis was forced to go to the FIA and backtrack on previous denials of misconduct, which only led to further investigations. In the end, Spygate ended up costing the team $100 million. Since then, both drivers have spoken very highly of each other and have seemingly left their rivalry in the past. Though it will be interesting to see if any hard feelings arise now that Alonso is back on the F1 grid once again. Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. And last, but certainly not least, we have the most famous and arguably most talked about team rivalry in F1 history. I'm of course talking about Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost.
Senna joined McLaren following the 1987 season, joining alongside Prost after he had won 2 back-to-back championships for the team in 85 and 86. Evidently, Prost thought he was the rightful number one driver at the team, but Senna would not settle for second best, quickly getting up to pace with the dominant MP4 and charging his way to the championship victory in 1988. It was not uncommon for these two to get in each other's way, even going so far as attempting to push each other into the barriers or run each other off the track. While there were many difficult and risky moves between the two, the tipping point in their relationship happened at Imola in 1989, after Senna disregarded a pre-race agreement and instead overtook Prost after the race restart, where he went on to take the win. After this incident, Prost was only further convinced that his teammate was given preferred treatment.
Then at Suzuka that same year, following the announcement that Prost would be moving to Ferrari at the end of the season, Senna attempted to pull off an overtake at the chicane but failed, resulting in a collision that knocked both drivers off the track. While it initially seemed as though the teammates were both out of the race, Senna was able to get started again thanks to the marshals, and went on to win. However, he was later disqualified, handing the title to Prost. This was one of the most controversial and highly contested championship outcomes in Formula One history. This sparked a flurry of accusations and arguments between McLaren, the FIA, and both drivers, with Prost having to deny any allegations that he was benefiting from favoritism at the FIA, while Senna received a $100,000 fine and threatened to leave the sport altogether in protest. Their on-track battles, masterful racecraft, and outright refusal to listen to team orders is part of what made their rivalry so spectacular. Their rivalry and overall disdain for each other continued even after Prost moved to Ferrari in the 90s, which only further solidified this as one of the most memorable eras in Formula One.
So there you have it. These were 4 of the biggest rivalries in Formula One. Of course there are others, but it seems like it just comes down to drivers not listening to team orders, if you ask me.
Other rivalries that come to mind are, of course, Mansell and Piquet, Prost and just about every other teammate he's ever had, Villeneuve and Pironi, and then in more recent years we've had Ralf Schumacher and Juan Pablo Montoya. You could even argue for Seb and Charles, or Daniel and Max, for example. But ultimately, one rivalry that we wish could just get kicked up a notch is, of course, Hamilton and Valtteri.
Which rivalries come to mind for you, and what do you remember most about them? And once again, let us know which team you think is going to have the biggest rivalry next year. One bad move on track could turn a relationship upside down. We would love to hear your thoughts. If you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave it a like. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so now.
Make sure to follow us on social media to keep the conversation going and to stay up to date on all of our latest videos.
If you haven't already, check out this video right here. Otherwise, we will catch you in the next one.
Bye!